I like to be punctual, so I'm going to go ahead and get started at 7 p.m. And I'd like to call the December 14, 2020 City Council meeting to order. Because of COVID-19 restrictions, our meeting tonight is being held virtually via Zoom. Public comments for this meeting are accepted in advance by mail and email. These comments will be read into the public record shortly. If you'd like to submit public comments for our next meeting, please visit the website at www.merriam.org and follow the directions listed there. As a reminder to City Council, please be conscientious of others trying to speak. Speak slowly and clearly. State your name prior to speaking. If I need to confirm something, it may have been difficult to hear, I'll ask for clarification. The format for the council consideration on items tonight will be staff presentation. Then I will open time for council questions. Please hold questions until the end of the staff presentation. If you have a question, when I ask for them, please physically raise your hand so I can see it on the video. Meredith, would you please call roll?
Yes, I would. Just so everyone's filling in a city clerk tonight, so please be patient with me as I learn how to do this publicly. So Mayor Sissom.
Here.
Councilmember DeBolt.
Here.
Councilmember Hands.
Here.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Here.
Councilmember Naff.
Here.
Councilmember Neal.
Here.
Councilmember Pape.
Here.
Councilmember Silvers.
Here.
And Councilmember Yadrich.
Here.
Thank you.
Very good. We're going to move to public comment. And Meredith, would you please read any public comments that were submitted in advance into the record?
Yes. So we have one public comment this evening from Billy Crone. It says, Merry Christmas from Renee and Billy Crone at 6633 Wedge Street. If we don't talk again before the 25th, we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. I would like to bring back this tradition. Perhaps you guys have been doing the pledge individually before the Zoom starts, and if so, my apologies for jumping to conclusions. I've been trying to put my finger on it, and one of the things I miss most dearly about our city council meetings from before COVID-19 began was the Pledge of Allegiance, which everyone in the room said together. It only takes a few seconds to recite these words and come together across distance and generations. And I cannot remember a time when when people needed to come together more than we do today. If we cannot do so physically, we may at least in spirit as Americans, as one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, and I wish you a joyful holiday season.
Very good. Good advice. Okay. There are no further public comments, so I'm going to move to our consent agenda. And all items listed under this heading are considered to be routine by the City Council and may be enacted in one motion. There'll be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests, in which case that item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Now we have 3 items on the consent agenda this evening. Do I have a desire from any of you on the council to remove any of the 3 items for separate discussion? Okay. Then I will entertain a motion in a second. Bob Pape.
Yeah, Mayor, I'd move the council approve consent agenda items 1 through 3.
And Jason, got your mute there.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Diebold.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Naff.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Pape.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
And Councilmember Yadrich.
Aye.
Vote passes.
Very good. All 3 passes. We'll move to our mayor's report. I have one item under the mayor's report, and that's a legislative agenda draft. Chris, would you please provide us with an update on this item?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The item before you this evening is the 2021 legislative agenda platform. Each year, the city puts together a platform to assert common goals that we'd like to see at least be top of mind awareness in Topeka with our legislators each year. So we've been putting this together for many, many years. This year, if you'll recall, because of the pandemic, really the 2020 legislative session it shut down pretty much. It wound down pretty quick. There were quite a few topics that we were of the opinion that folks that might garner some discussion. So we believe that some of those will be picked up in 2021, although clearly COVID is going to probably be a pretty large discussion topic. So it's our recommendation that we carry the 2020 legislative platform over to 2021, although we're going to recommend we add these two particular items, two additional items that I'll talk about here in a second. Again, these are all items that are that we assert that we come upon through conversations with a variety of other local governmental entities. We talk with the county, we talk with our neighbors, we use the legislative platforms of the Chamber and the League of Kansas Municipalities, and we kind of amalgamate all of those together and try to synthesize what we think makes the most sense to assert at a city level. And so these things are listed, or at least the folks that we have pulled or have a similar statement are listed on the draft agenda. You'll see, I didn't put a legend on there, I apologize, but I figured most of it was going to be pretty self-explanatory. If the language from last year was the same, the first thing that's going to be on there is same. JOCO clearly means JOCO. I think everything's going to be self-explanatory except for SW is Shawnee. So if there was a question about what SW meant, that means that Shawnee, this is an issue for Shawnee. Some of these are going to be verbatim across the variety of bodies, but a lot of them, as you can imagine, cities, different organizations like to put a little bit different twist on maybe some of the language. So all of these, other than our sales tax collection on automobiles, which is clearly has always been our #1 item, and I would strongly recommend remain our #1 item. All of these also are supported in multiple organizations that I just mentioned. So the two items that we think would be important to add this year is a pandemic response, which really this was put together in conversation with Stuart Little, our legislative lobbyist. And it talks about clarifying some statutory authority that the city has, and then also supporting financially and administratively the regulations that will help guide the state back to firm footing at the end of the pandemic. And then the second item is energy efficiency. And so that's essentially just a broad statement about a statewide energy plan and then the establishment of incentives. Those that are familiar or have looked for incentives on Evergy/KCP&L websites will see that those are offered in Missouri, but they are not offered in Kansas. That is because the legislature has not chose to fund those or taken that up as an issue. So we would promote that item also. And we believe that, that with the growth of wind farms and alternative energy sources, that's a conversation that's being had more readily at the state level these days. So those would be two items that we would suggest to be added. I can go through all of these. I can go through particular ones if we'd like to wordsmith any of these, or if you have questions about them. This does not necessarily need to be approved this meeting. If there's something in here that we get high centered on, we can definitely punt this until January. We would have Stuart, as we normally do, be on a call in January to kind of take us through his view of the upcoming session that starts in January. So we can push this till then, but we usually try to get this to you at the end of the year. So that is why it's in front of you. Again, I would take any guidance if anybody would like to talk about any of these in particular. Again, most of these, other than two of them, are carryovers from 20, and many of them are carryover from years prior to.
Okay, well, thank you for that update and information. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share, add, or request? I don't see any. I think the city's always done a good job. I don't know, we often wonder how much good this does. And again, it's one of the duties of the city to at least state where they're coming from as it relates to legislative issues, and this is our primary way of doing it. And I think our biggest problem in the past has been just having simply too many of them. After a while, you get to the point where they get watered down. So I think we have a good grouping, and the additions we have are certainly timely and important. So last call for any questions. Okay.
I don't have a question, but if we don't have conversation, I'm really ready to make a motion.
I was getting there to go there next. So
Oh, okay.
go right ahead.
I move that we accept and propose the 2020 Merriam legislative agenda as proposed.
A second. David Neal.
Yeah, I'd second that.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Hands,
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell,
Aye.
Councilmember Nath,
Aye.
Councilmember Neal,
Aye.
Councilmember Pape,
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers,
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich,
Aye.
Councilmember Diebold.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Very good. Thank you. Let's move into council items. First, items consider approval of an agreement with Johnson County for the enforcement of county health orders. Chris, you want to start us off?
I will, and I'll probably cover most of this, but the city attorney will may need to jump in and help me with some of this if there's some specific details about this. But the item in front of you this evening is an agreement with Johnson County Board of County Commissioners. As you are all aware, we are under a public health order. That health order was issued on November 13th of 2020, and it became effective at 12:01 on November 16th, 2020, and remains in effect through midnight on January 31st of 2021. There's a typo in there. One of our eagle-eyed council members pointed out that I did not have the year correct on there. So the current health order is set to expire at midnight on, 11:59 on January 31st, unless it's amended, revoked, or replaced. The health order essentially is about spatial, providing space in businesses, restaurants, about in terms of the 6-foot separation. It's about dividers, it's about percent capacity, and it's about closing times for restaurants and bars. It's not about masks. Masks are covered under the governor's order, and enforcement of those occurs under the district attorney's office. So really what this is about the enforcement of the Johnson County health order, with the county stepping in and wanting to be the enforcing party in that of that order. And using the word enforcement is probably a strong word. They are handing this over to their codes department, which they have about 5 or 6 of them to do this across the whole county. And when we talk about enforcement, really what we're talking about education. So it will be to have conversations with businesses that aren't in compliance. I will tell you, and so the level of response will be like a code enforcement level of response. If someone were to call and say business X is open and they're inside partying and it's 12:30, there's not going to be a response at the county level at 12:30. They will be visited the next day or the day after that, and again, just essentially have a conversation with them. The county, because it's going to the codes department, there is some conversation, or there's been some conversations, and I might defer to Ryan here in terms of where the statutory authority lies for the county to do that, and if they actually need this. Really, at the end of the day, what this agreement does, I believe, and I'll give Ryan a second here, is it just clears up if there's any sort of murkiness in the ability of the county to enforce this order within the boundaries of our community. Again, I think staff is of the opinion that the county wanting to come in and enforce their own health order is a good thing. I mean, it's their health order. And I will tell you that relative to UPOC 1029, which if you will recall in early October, there were some conversations about when we approved the UPOC. 1029 says that the city will enforce public health orders. So really, when it comes down to what this agreement is or is not, is we currently, the world as it exists today, we live under UPOC Chapter 1023, or 1029, I apologize. And so we will either enforce the health order because we approved 1029, we will choose not to enforce the health order, or we will give the county the authority or the permission to come in and enforce their health order. Again, enforce being a hard word, but this is not about masks. It isn't about necessarily people. It's about businesses and restaurants. That being said, I'll kick it over to Ryan and see if he has any comment to add to that before we answer some questions.
Sure. Yeah, so I did have some follow-up communications with representatives of the county last week, specifically Cindy Dunham, who is the interim county counselor, and then also Joe Connor, who is deputy county administrator. Some of my inquiries were on points that Chris asked about. My initial question to Cindy was, well, there are all kinds of health orders. Why do you feel that you need this agreement in place to come in and enforce the order? And her answer to that is it's in the mechanism of enforcement in county codes court. And so it was her legal opinion that was offered that county codes court only has jurisdiction in unincorporated areas of the county. And so for enforcement to occur in county codes court in incorporated areas of the county, that they would need city consent to come in and do that. So that's the reason why they included the agreement provision of Resolution 108-20. The other question I had for them, because there is a provision, I think it's in paragraph 8 perhaps, and it indicates that that the city will defer to the county on enforcement of the health order. And I had specific conversations both with Joe Connor and with Cindy about the interplay between 1029 and the county's enforcement in county codes court. And both of them indicated that it was not the county's intent to in any way interfere if the city of Merriam or any other city that adopted 1029, if they wanted to independently enforce the county health order in question. So those were two of the points that Chris touched on that I thought might be pertinent, but I had some other discussions with them as well, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
So thanks, Ryan. Appreciate that. Again, I think one of the other points, again, that I didn't make it, would be that either party can terminate this agreement whenever it's in their best interest, and this only covers the existing health order, the existing public health order. So if there are other public health orders, this would be a conversation somewhere down the road. This would be a conversation we would need to likely have again. That's correct, Ryan? I believe that's okay. And again, we can opt out of this at any time we don't. Again, I think from a practical matter, because of the approval of 1029, there's really three options. It's either we choose to enforce the health order at the Merriam level through the Merriam Police Department. We recognize there's a health order and choose not to enforce it, even though I would probably tell you we're somewhat, maybe not compelled, but there is a health order that we've said we would enforce, or we allow the county to come and enforce their order. So I think from a practical matter, those are really the three options that we're looking at. I suppose there's a fourth one where we could have the county come in and we could ramp up and help them do what they're doing, but I would probably say that would be more than is needed. We have not had any, at least through conversations with the police chief this morning. This is not an issue we're having in our community. Again, it's been a month now since the health order, almost a month now since the health order started, And this is not an issue that we're seeing in our community. People are perhaps begrudgingly, but they're adhering to the public health order.
Mr. Neal, did you have a question?
It wasn't really a question. Just a brief sort of thought here. And it boils down to the fact that since I think you framed it, we have three options, and it just makes sense, I think, to let the county quote enforce the county health order of those three choices. That seems to me the logical one. People who may have concerns about, the county telling businesses that they have to close early, and the financial burdens that that they're getting or receiving as a result of COVID-19, and some of these changes are something that I worry about a lot. And I've spent a good portion of time this year, lobbying our federal legislators for support, additional support for state and local governments, and also, for small business to help them through doing what is really a necessary thing. In my belief, my son is a physician, works on staff at St. Louis University Hospital, has been treating COVID patients since early April. That's mostly what he does. This is a really serious thing. I have a family member who got COVID in early July and still has not, at 27 years old, still has not recovered his sense of taste and smell, and may not possibly ever. That's quite a, even though he's not dead, that's a kind of a pretty sad thing to lose some of your senses. So I think we have to do some things because of the variable nature of the way this impacts people that we don't want to do necessarily. And I think the county has put a lot of thought into this, and we have agreed to follow the health order. So with a lot of thought, obviously, I think we should approve this simply because I think that's the best of the three options.
I have a question maybe for the chief if he's out there. I'm kind of sensitive to certain businesses that stay open late at night, and only because I've had experience when I was on the police department with them, not always abiding by the rules that the city puts on them, which used to be a problem mostly for bars that no longer exist in our city. However, I know in certain areas there's quite a problem with the bars not wanting to comply. I don't really believe that involves our city, but would there be any opposition? And I don't know again what our role should be. That seems like there's a health order that says they have to close at midnight. So if one of our department vehicles drove by one of these businesses at 1 o'clock or 12:30 and they're still going strong, obviously the county's not going to know anything about that unless somebody complains. Now we could certainly complain. I would wonder if there wouldn't be a problem for us to stop in and do a bar check and tell them that they are in violation, not that we're enforcing it, but letting them know that they're in violation of a health order, and that's not acceptable, at least from the county's perspective, and that they may hear from the county if they don't abide. Would that be something that you could see happening, or would that be a problem?
No, it wouldn't be a problem. That's what we do.
Yeah.
I've been doing since the COVID started is education. So if we got, when this first started up, and the rules were new back in spring, we were fielding complaints, and we would go and talk to businesses, and we gained compliance, and actually we didn't have anybody tell us no. So we're still saying if we get a complaint or we catch somebody violating the rules, we educate. If we get repeated complaints, or we keep finding an issue, then absolutely we will turn it over to the county for enforcement, and we'll go from there, and we'll work with the county if we have a chronic business problem. But so far, Merriam, our business owners have been very good citizens, and they've always, if asked, and referred to the proper education materials, they've always done what they need to do.
Well, they haven't always been that way. I'm glad to hear that. Any other questions? Okay, well, I'll enter a motion in a second. Bob Pape,
Yeah, Mayor, I'd move the council approve an agreement with the Johnson County for the enforcement of the county health order.
and second, Chris Hands.
And I'll second Chris Hands.
Motion's made and seconded. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Caldwell,
Aye.
Councilmember Naff,
Aye.
Councilmember Neal,
Aye.
Councilmember Pape,
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers,
Aye.
Councilmember Yadrich,
Aye.
Councilmember Diebold,
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Motion passes.
I don't know if I should call Madam Clerk or Madam Assistant City Administrator.
I don't know.
Madam's a lot harder to say than the other. So
Yeah,
stick with clerk.
that's perfect.
Good. Next item is consider approval of ETC citizen and business survey tools. Meredith, would you like to bring this up?
Yes, thank you. So I have presented on this item at both of the November council meetings, November 9th and November 23rd, and got feedback from all of you about some tweaks to make to the question wording. On this final draft, I want to draw your attention to two updated questions based on our last conversation. In the citizen survey, question 16.5 is our proposed language for the question about the grocery store and incentives. And it reads, Merriam should try to bring a grocery store to town, even if it requires giving the store a multi-million-dollar public incentive package. And then I'll read the business question and we can open it up for discussion. The business question that we made some changes to is question number 29, where we changed the sectors of businesses to better reflect Merriam's. And so we went through the sales tax report and we went through our business license sectors to make sure that we captured everybody. So those are our proposed changes. I'm happy to answer any questions about those.
Anybody got anything to say? Questions? Bob Pape.
Yeah, Mayor, it's Bob. Yeah, I think you reflected what our discussion was, which was pretty lengthy last time. Well, I think that those questions as they're posed now meet the intent of what we were trying to get at. I also, think that, they're all good questions, and, I applaud staff for listening to what we had to say anyway. So.
And I'll second what Bob just said, because deciphering that long conversation, you guys did a good job. Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't want to throw a wet blanket on this, but I do have a comment, or maybe it's a concern, and I want you all to be aware of the concern so we can go forward. I don't have a problem with the language at all or the fact that it's in there. But anytime you do surveys, you run a risk. And the risk that I see with this potentially is for us to say, ask the people the question that's been posed, and we get a resounding no. They would not be interested. And so then their message has been heard. And then 6 months from now, we get an opportunity to do just that. Do we disregard what the survey results were and do it anyway, depending upon what it is that we have? I mean, it's going to potentially create a problem for us. Again, I have no reason to believe that it will. But I think back about the opportunities, for example, if they'd asked us, under no circumstances would we consider a similar incentive for a business at the former location of, I don't even know what it was called. It was a Town Center South, or whatever it was called. And then IKEA came to town, and we had promised everybody we weren't going to do something like that. That's a pretty special opportunity would have been really hard to turn that down, I'll be honest with you. But we might have had to do that and kind of flying in the face of the people who said they really weren't interested. So I think if we're going to go forward with this, we just need to recognize that that's a possibility. Mr. Engel, you got anything to add to that?
No, I think that's a great point. I mean, sometimes you do have to be careful what you ask for. And the council would be put in a tough situation should something like this pop up. I think the assumption of this question, the core of it, is that we are interested in bringing a grocery store. And I think the question is, should we provide money? If the answer is no, then that would give us some direction. I think in terms, I hate to say political cover, but I mean, if the answer was a resounding no to this, but there was a grocery store that say was part of a larger development, the money would likely go to the developer, not the grocery store. So that might be a semantics.
Oh, semantics, yeah, I get it. Chris Hans?
It's Chris Hans here. It seems to me that even if we get a resounding no, if an opportunity comes, we have knowledge of what kind of education we need to provide for people, or information, if education is not the right word. It gives us more of a direct feel for what they're thinking about.
Mr. Neal.
Yeah, I kind of want to respond too, because I think I have similar thought to Councilmember Hands, but the downside, yes, if there's a resounding no, is that when something comes along, we can ask again with some more particulars and more knowledge of what we're actually talking about. And so if we're looking at getting a more interactive tool next year, I really don't think that a no right now necessarily means that we can't find out what the sentiment is when an actual opportunity presents itself. So for that reason, I'm not as worried about having that on here. So.
Right. And again, I didn't mention this to try to dissuade it. I think it's just good to have this conversation, because sometimes those things come up, and then, we can't, I guess, be accused of not considering this as a possibility. And that's the only thing I'm bringing it up for. I agree completely with what you're saying. It doesn't necessarily mean no, because as a city council, we can decide what to do, what's best for the city, in spite of what maybe a survey result has told, because, again, we didn't have particulars when and there weren't any particulars in this particular question. It was general. When you get into the specifics, it may not meet the intent of the original question, or other factors might also play into it, which caused us to reconsider. So, and it's not, none of these things are a promise. Mr. DeVoe?
Just real quick thought on that is that I think the question potentially has three questions. Okay, do you want a grocery store? Do you want to have an incentive for it? And then I think the third one is, what level of incentive? So when you get in a sounding no, which one were they saying no to? So I think that goes back to what David was saying, is I think that could be presented again with more detail. So again, I don't see that as an issue either. I think we could. The question's very vague, very, very vague as to what any particulars there. So I think it's something that we could bring up again without a problem.
Okay. Any other comments? I'll accept the motion in a second. Bob Pape?
Yeah, Mayor, I would move that the council approve the 2021 Citizen and Business ETC survey tool.
And Whitney Rodrich?
This is Whitney Aldrich. I second.
Have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Naff,
Aye.
Councilmember Neal,
Aye, and I'm glad we've got the business survey on here too
Very
this
nice.
time. I think that'll be helpful. Thank you.
yeah. Councilmember Pape,
Yes, aye.
Councilmember Silvers,
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBold,
Aye.
Councilmember Hands,
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Next item, number 3, is consider approval of a resolution amending the employee handbook. Meredith, would you please update us on this?
Yes, good evening. So as Stephanie, Donna, and I have gone through the handbook over the last year, we have identified a number of cleanup items that we have proposed to make this evening. And these are not substantial policy changes, but really just aligning the handbook more with our actual practices or cleaning up even small legal issues that we saw when we were going through it. So I know it's a pretty lengthy packet item, but the changes are actually pretty minor once you get into it. So I'm happy to answer any questions about any specific policy updates. So I'll just open the floor for that rather than cover all of them.
Any questions on the information that was provided? Okay. All right. Head shaking in the right direction, I guess. All right, well, and I'll go ahead and accept the second, a motion to accept in a second. Jason Silvers.
I move that the council approve the resolution amending the employee handbook of Merriam, Kansas.
Bob, do you want to second it?
Sure, Mayor, I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Pape.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBold.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Nath.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Very good. Item number 4 is a final pay request from McCarthy Building Companies. Meredith, want to tell us about this?
Yes, good evening. So McCarthy Building Companies has completed their contract and has submitted their final pay request to us. So all in with this final payment of $87,777.64, the total amount of their contract will be $33.2 million. I just want to confirm for everybody that the project remains on budget. We did approve some change orders to McCarthy's original contract of $32.5 million, but we paid for those out of the budgeted owner's contingency. So overall, we do remain within budget for this project. We do have a couple of items that are still on the punch list, but those are all warranty items. So McCarthy has completed their scope of work in their contract. I would be happy to answer any questions, and I will share that I will be back in January to provide a full financial update on this project. We're just waiting for that final round of invoices to come in.
Brian.
Yes, I just wanted to commend the staff on this project. Chris, Meredith, Anna, you guys did this project with excellence, and I just want to publicly thank you all for all your hard work on this project.
Thank you very much.
Second that.
Yeah. And being within budget.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially
Second that.
given the challenges we've had with COVID. And I know that some of that contingency money that went over was actually probably COVID related, which I think many of us were concerned that that could have been a much larger number. I know it also contributed to the timing and not getting done on time. It wasn't a matter of McCarthy not doing their work. It's just they couldn't get the materials to do their work with. So I agree. It was done. You really did a good job keeping on track of things. With that, I'll accept the motion in a second. Scott, for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that the council approve the final pay request for McCarthy Building Companies for the Merriam Community Center project.
Do I have a second? Bob Pape.
I'll second, Mayor.
Motion made in second. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Pape.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBold.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Nath.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Very good. Item number 5 is consider approval of an ordinance amending Chapter 47 of the Merriam Code of Ordinances relating to hiking and biking trails. And also, there's a recommendation for the waiver of the first reading. Anna, glad to see you here this evening.
Good evening, Mayor. It's good to see you all this evening as well. Before you this evening is a change in Chapter 47, Article 3, Section 47-90, the hiking and biking ordinance. There are 3 major changes. It's a little bit of history. This came about due to changes required with the American with Disabilities Act and the need to identify other power-driven mobility devices, allowing people with disabilities access to the trails. So after a pilot project with Johnson County Parks and Recreation, they took the main brunt of this to decide what would be safe vehicles on paths, since many of our trails are interconnecting, not only in Johnson County, but also with the Kansas City metro area. It is very easy to connect between various locations throughout the city. We wanted to be as compliant across the board and make it as easy on the end user that everybody kind of drafts very similar ordinances as to what is and is not acceptable on the trails. So the 3 main changes, again, we're removing the name park horse from the title. We do not have park horses in Merriam. Those are exercise trails, usually found on like single bike paths. So if we were to put in an exercise trail in the future, it would be along a paved trail and wouldn't be identified as a park horse. We're identifying the definitions of various modes of transportation so that if there is somebody on the trail, there is a clear definition as to the type of vehicle that is and is not allowed. And then the third is the permitted and restricted use of those motorized vehicles. Basically, this would allow for e-bicycles. There are 3 types. We would allow for 2 types of e-bikes based on our definitions, as well as motorized wheelchairs. All other forms of motorized transportation would not be allowed. This was specifically in mind with the e-scooters that are very popular, specifically right now in the Kansas City metro, but we do see that expanding out as people become more versed in how e-scooters work. So those are the conveyances that we are looking to add to the trails. They are limited in speed. So I think the fastest one of them might go is 10 miles per hour. But that's kind of the safe deem, and people don't really recognize the difference between an e-bike and a regular bike. That's one of the things that during the pilot project with JCPRD was discovered. So by making these changes, we come in alignment with the American with Disabilities Act. We become more user-friendly and we align with our neighboring cities and municipalities. We are asking for the waiving of the first read so that this can go into effect immediately as soon as Julie does her part with it. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Board did review the ordinance changes and they approved these unanimously. So if there's any questions.
Jason Silvers.
This is Jason Silvers. I have a clarification I'd like to get and then also a question. When you say wheelchairs, does that also include mobility scooters?
So a wheelchair mobility scooter, we're looking at those as relatively the same item, a rascal. I mean, so we would look at those as being the same item.
So they don't need to be broken out to alleviate any confusion?
No, I think because of the definition of the electric wheelchair and how that works, it is a personal assisted mobility device, non-tandem. I think that still falls into the same qualification. Ryan, if I'm wrong?
Yeah, so if you look at the definition of motorized wheelchair, it defines it as any self-propelled vehicle designed specifically for use by a physically disabled person, and such vehicle is incapable of a speed in excess of 15 miles per hour. So that would include both traditional motorized wheelchair as well as a rascal. Rascal, in essence, is motorized for that very purpose, to be used by individuals with disabilities to assist them. So my reading of, and that definition comes from state statute, and it's referenced there, KSA 8-1439C.
Okay, thank you for that. My question is, will the city be putting up signage to support this to hopefully alleviate any angry citizens or calls to the police because of possible an increase of motorized vehicles on the trails?
We will probably put something on a side cabinet. I'm not looking at actual signage on the trails itself, mainly because, like I said, e-bikes are not something that people would recognize immediately based on the study by JCPRD. But as it is now, there is a nursing home that sits along the trail, and there have been people from the nursing home that have been utilizing motorized vehicles such as the wheelchairs or the rascals, and we have never received any complaints about them being on trails. So I don't foresee there being any increased complaints based on the fact that these are now allowed, because we've just always allowed them. It's just never been part of the code before, making it legal.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bob Pape.
Yeah, Ms. Bob. Yeah, and does the park board, or is there any recommendation from them concerning maybe the installation of any of these e-scooters or e-bikes for people's use that we would own, or along the trail? Or is it strictly just be something that that people just have to bring on their own?
Because there was no recommendation for us to purchase any of these, an e-bike, just so you know, can run upwards of $1,000. So then you have the locking of it and all of that. So typically people that need that type are buying that on their own. They're usually avid bicyclists that over time have discovered that they can't do the same distances. And so they're just looking for a little bit of pedal assist. And the same thing with like scooters or electric wheelchairs of those natures. This just allows people that have that restriction the ability to use the tools that they need to get out and enjoy the trail. So there is no recommendation that we purchase anything and make it available.
Okay, thank you.
I wonder, and maybe Mr. Pape is referring to, I know in the inner city areas, they have rental
Exactly.
units that we wouldn't purchase. They would just be allowed to install them. I don't know that there'd be a need for that in our area, but so what you're talking about?
Yes, Mayor, that's what I was referring to, and I'm not sure what those are called, so.
Yeah.
But
I understand. I was just, so those are usually you coordinate with probably Mid-America Regional Center and the Transportation Department on those. And they usually look for a certain amount of usage. So we haven't gotten to the point that we have a lot of people coming into town looking for that type of transportation. Excuse me. But that's why they're like downtown, so people can move up and down Main Street. And they have a lot of different destination locations that they can use those at. Merriam's just not quite there yet. I don't think we have the capacity for that yet.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay, we've got a request for a motion to waive the first reading. So I'll accept the motion and second for that. Chris Hands.
Chris Hands here. I move that the council waive the customary first reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 47 of the Merriam City Code of Ordinances.
And Bob Pape on the second.
I'll second that, Mayor.
Motion made and second, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Silvers,
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBold,
Aye.
Councilmember Hands,
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell,
Aye.
Councilmember Naff,
Aye.
Councilmember Neal,
I'm going to vote aye. I don't know why we need to necessarily do waive the first reading other than make it a decision tonight. But in general, it's good to let the public, if they have any concerns, speak to it. But I'm going to go ahead and vote yes.
Councilmember Pate.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Motion passes, and I'll accept the motion and a second for the original ordinance.
Someone's at someone's front door.
It's mine. I'm trying to. Pate, please go ahead.
Yes, Mayor, this is Bob. I'll move the council approve an ordinance amending chapter 47 of the Merriam City Code of Ordinances.
And Scott DeBold.
Scott Diebold, I'll second that.
Motion made second, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBold.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Naft.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Pate.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Very good. Very good. Okay, let's move to year-end financial update. Donna, you out there somewhere? Donna Oliver. There we go. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Before I get started on the financial update, I want to update you on a question that one of the council members called and asked me today, and that was where we are on the contract with Denton Excavating on the demolition of the Irene B. French building. The original contract was for $100,475. We've had two change orders. One was to disconnect the sewer. One was to remove two cistern tanks. Together, those brought the total contract up to $107,915. And we have now made a final pay on that contract. So if there's any other questions on that, please let me know. And with that, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. As everyone is aware, the past year has not been your typical year. And as I was thinking about—
Donna, can I interrupt you real quick? If you want to start your PowerPoint, we'll be able to see it.
Well, I did on my screen. Oh, you know what? It's showing up. It's showing up over on my other screen.
I think we can see the slides. We can see the slides, but I was, so continue.
There you go. I can tell the council not to look at the sides. Would that help?
Yeah.
I have two screens, and for some reason it was bouncing onto the other. But anyway, it's been a weird year, and as we have thought about finances, there's really been a lot of swings. And so I want to take us back to August of 2019, before we ever dreamed there was going to be a pandemic, and we had just adopted the 2020 budget. And at that time, whenever we were looking at 2020, we were kind of anticipating about a 6.3 million beginning fund balance, revenues of close to 18.5 million, expenditures of 15.5, and transfers out of 4.5. And we were going to end up with a fund balance of about 4.6 million. Then 2020 2020 hit, and we began looking at the 2021 budget, and kind of everything changed. And as you can see, we did have a higher beginning fund balance, but we projected our revenues way down as we were uncertain what sales tax would do. We immediately started trying to identify areas where we could reduce expenditures. And a lot of times these reduced expenditures were just deferred expenditures, ones that we know eventually someday we will make. And then some of them were ones that, well, we can just hold off and maybe never do it, but we had some deferred. And we were looking at, with those cuts and expenditures and transfers, we were still looking at ending up at about the same ending fund balance. Now, as the year has progressed and I've given you financial updates, the primary thing I've said is sales tax continues to look much better than we thought. And so whenever we try to compare where we were in August 2020 when we were updating the 21 budget to now, you'll see that as we look at revenues, we're up 1.6 million in revenues. Almost all of that sales and use tax. And so that's been a great benefit to the city. And really, most of the other revenue sources have kind of fallen in line with those. The one exception is the charges for services. And you'll see right now, we're projecting a decrease, and that's where the community center revenues go. And, you know, as the pandemic lingers, you know, this is the result of it. But we also know that hopefully we're getting close to the end of the pandemic, and that that's a short-term problem. Expenditure-wise, we were looking at in August of having between expenditures and transfers just under 18 million. We are now looking at, that's actually been reduced down to about 16 million. So that's saved about 1.5 million. So whenever we look at the general fund right now compared to where we were in August, and again, remember that number was pretty close to where we thought we were going to be in August of 19 when we adopted the budget, we're up about $3 million. Again, revenue, you see the revenue's up about 1.6, the expenditures are down. And once again, I do want to remind you that while that fund balance has gone up, the one cautionary tale is, you know, some of those expenditures we're probably still going to see come back and we're going to have to do. So it's good that our fund balance is up, because obviously you can only delay the replacement of a car, things like that, so long before it all catches up on you. But still, I feel that this is one of the best outcomes that we could have had. Never would have dreamed it would have been this good in March. And so one other fund that I just briefly want to take a look at is transient guest tax. That's another revenue source that we've certainly seen impacted by coronavirus. We're not having nearly as much travel right now. And so we're still projecting, we're right now projecting that the revenues are 287. That's just a little over half of what we had last year. And those at Karen with the Visitors Bureau and the other departments that have expenditures in here have certainly cut back on expenditures, but this is not sustainable. But again, it seems like that we're coming towards the end of the virus, and so as we progress through there, that's something that we're going to need to closely monitor as we go to starting 2021 and as we're doing the 2022 budget. oh, and right now this is where we're looking at finalizing the year with the transient guest tax.
Donna, if I could just remind the city council that in the 2021 budget, we did make some structural changes to the transient guest tax in anticipation of these shortfalls in revenue. So there were things that we caught that the transient guest tax fund was the cost center. We moved some of those into the general fund. So we have made some structural changes in that so that if the pandemic does continue and those revenues continue to be a little lacking from what we historically have been used to, that we can continue to weather the storm because we have, again, offloaded some of those expenditures to the general fund. So just wanted to remind council that they did approve that with the 2021 budget.
Thank you very much for reminding us. And so lastly, just to kind of see things from a whole city perspective, if we kind of look from the same perspective again, when we were doing the budget in August of 2019, we were looking at an ending fund balance of about 24 million. In August, we were looking at an ending fund balance of about 20.5 million. And now we're back up even a little bit ahead of where we thought 24 million. Right now, it looks like it's going to be about 25.3 million. Some of this putting us over where we even thought we were going to be then, however, is some delays in capital projects that we're looking to possibly do next year now. And at one point we had 650,000 in for the demolition of the Irene B. French building. And as we talked about to begin with, that came in considerably lower, et cetera. So that's really all I had on this presentation tonight, but I would be happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
I talked with Karen Crane earlier this week about how the hotels were doing, in general, because I know, much like the airlines, they're really struggling. She says they're weathering it. I think, of course, they're mostly in all chain hotels, so they're not just a Merriam thing. It's all across the country. They seem to be weathering it as everyone is. I did make a mention that one of the hotels that I know of does a lot of contracts with companies, large companies. It used to be the railroad, now some other large construction companies, and they'll rent out whole blocks of rooms for, I guess, the whole year in some cases, or maybe several months at a time. But she informed me that if you stay in a hotel for more than, I think she said 30 days, that we do not capture any of those revenues. I mean, any of those taxing revenues. I don't know if that's something that needs to be revisited, or if that's normal with other cities or whatever. It seems like that's a good way of getting out of having to pay the taxes. But I mean, we're still paying for, protecting their vehicles, responding to their calls, all these things. And that's the reason why we have that tax. I don't know if you have any comments about that. Mr. Neal?
Yeah, my question would be, I mean, obviously the name of the tax is transient guest. How does that apply? I mean, yes, a company may rent the room, but is the same person staying in there for that period of time? And how does that apply? Because they, kind of a legal question, I suppose, because are they really transient or not? Are they really not transient? And is the intent of the law being somehow kind of sidestepped here by just a corporation renting the rooms, but yet then using it as sort of a private hotel for their workers that are coming in and out? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how it's being used, but I just throw that out as a follow-up to your thought.
Yeah.
If I could, this is Chris. I do not know if that's if that's state legislation or if that's within our policy, but I think that's a great point. I think that's something that we can dig into in the interim between now and January, or maybe I can find that tomorrow. It may be easy to find. But yeah, we can definitely look into that and make sure that that's not being used in a way that violates the spirit and the intent of the legislation. But no, I think that's a good point. But I
only bring that up because I wasn't aware of that nuance, I guess, in the laws or the rules. So certainly, I'd like to hear. Chances are we're following some edict that goes beyond our city. But anyway, very, very good news on the financial front. Again, this is kind of like the recession of 2008 and 2009, when so many of our neighbors really, really, really struggled financially. And by comparison, we did so much better. I think a lot of it has to do with just our mixture of retail. We have a lot of businesses that actually flourish during down times. You would think, though, I mean, we were all, I think, prepared, concerned about the auto industry because they typically take a big hit, but apparently wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be, and that's great. We were certainly prepared to, and that's the main point. City staff tightened their belts, delayed projects. I know some people might say, well, that's money you need to spend anyway, but what they need to realize is, no, these are important projects we put on hold and delayed them. That means that we're going to be paying for them next year. And we all need to recognize that when those expenditures start to occur, things are kind of getting even. So, any other questions? Yes, Donna.
That I think one of our most valuable assets is we have this really healthy fund balance, and so when things like this happen, we don't have to react with a knee-jerk reaction of let's lay everybody off, or let's unscrew every other light bulb or whatever. We can weather the storm. And I think that's a great benefit to the city. Keep that there.
I agree. I agree with you completely, except that I see some cities in our county that have much better fund balances than ours that do react with a knee-jerk reaction. And again, we are conservative in terms of the way we budget and handle our funds, but we're not overreactive. Plus one of the values that we enjoy as a small city is we're extremely flexible. We can make changes quickly, and we do. We have the ability to do things that other large cities can't do just because they're a much larger machine that moves in a much slower but difficult to change direction mode. And we hire excellent staff people that keeps us afloat and gives us the right advice. Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to offer, I found the statute on transient guest tax, KSA 12-1692, defines a transient guest as a person who occupies a room in a hotel, motel, or tourist court for not more than 28 consecutive days. I do know, and I've in other cities, I've home ruled out from under the provisions of the act, so that is a possible workaround on that. But I'm sure that's where the requirement comes from.
Yeah, and I would be hesitant to ask us to do that at this point. I think maybe we should look in. This may be a really small thing, but I do believe there's a high likelihood that I'll use Union Missouri Pacific, or who had it for a long. One of the railroads had it for a long time. I don't think they use it anymore. I know they move people in and out. They weren't always the same people. They might have been somebody in there to spend 3 or 4 weeks, and then the next guy might spend 3 months there, and it's constantly changing. So we don't know whether they're actually in violation or in compliance of this, because a corporation will rent a block of room for a year, and they put in there anybody they want, so it'd be easy to circumvent it, and we would know the difference. I don't know how much money we're losing as a result of this, but it might be something just, again, when you have time, Chris, look into it, talk to Karen, see if there's anything here, and you can get back with us. David, Neil?
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting any particular course of action. My question was just to try to understand a little bit more about it. And that sounds like what we're doing. Everybody, you got competing interests that, the lodging industry is struggling. You don't want to, but at the same time, you don't want to get in the middle of commerce, but at the same time, if the city is charging some set of customers the tax and not another set, then that also brings up some questions. And so just knowing what's going on and what the law is just helpful at this point. So I wasn't trying to suggest a course of action, but I just kind of was curious.
Yeah, I would imagine these corporations could afford the small tax that they would have to pay as opposed to mom and dad are out on vacation. I mean, I don't know about you, but I go I can't remember when I used to go on vacation. It's been so long ago, but I was always interested in knowing how much each jurisdiction charged me extra for staying in a hotel in their city. In some cases, it was pretty exorbitant. Scott, did you have a comment?
No, sir. No.
Okay, I thought I saw your hand.
I did, but David Neal pretty much covered it. So
okay.
I think here's what I'm hearing. Just you all see the police blotter also. I mean, I think the mayor brought up the point about just the level of service that sometimes these places require of us that might at least be part of the equation when we gather the data, which we will, to develop some sort of course of action. But yeah, let us gather some information and get back with everybody, because I do think there's a lot of good points that at least I hadn't really considered in the past about that. So yeah, we'll look into that and we'll get something back to council.
Mr. Mayor, I real quick, part of me is, looking at these companies have contracts with these businesses. How much do we want to alienate a business in our city as well? Because those contracts could move on and elsewhere. So I think that's something we need to think about and be conscious as we look into this too. So.
And I think Karen Crane would have a good working understanding for those potentials as well, because this really is kind of her business, and we don't want to do anything to hurt our hotels. I mean, it's a delicate balance.
Sure.
I just don't want to be taken advantage of by large corporations at the.
Amen to that. Yeah.
So, not that I'm against large corporations, but still, everybody should pay their share. It's somewhat fair anyway. Anything to add, Donna, with regard to that? I think we kind of got off track a little ways. If not, we'll move. We got the November finance reports in the packet, CIP updates in the packet, unless anybody has any questions. Not too much is going on right now in CIP. Chris, I'll ask you about staff items. Anything for this evening?
Just to let everybody know that the facilities will be closed on Friday the 25th for Christmas and on Friday the 1st of January for New Year's Day. The facilities will all open again on the next business day. That's going to vary between say community center and city hall, but the next business day after those holidays, we will all be open again. So just as a reminder. Second, I wanted to thank the council. This was our last meeting of the year. This has been a year unlike any other year for everybody, let alone just us, our residents, our organization, the city council, us as individuals. It hasn't been easy on any of us as individuals. Sure hasn't been hard. It has not been easy on our organization, which is made up of individuals. But we, because of the trust and the support that you've provided staff, we've been able to be nimble, to use a suggestion that Mayor said about the size of our community and our organization. And we've been able to really stay the course. When we had to hunker down earlier in the year at the department head level and decide what was to zig or to zag or to jump or to duck or to, abandon ship, it was because of the great support and leadership of the council and the mayor and the individual suggestions and support that we received from individual council members that really helped us through all of this. So I do want to thank you and publicly acknowledge that it's the team, all of us together, that's really helped us persevere and stay on course. And so I just wanted to make sure that you heard publicly from me that I appreciate all of your support and your trust and faith, and I and my staff, we've needed it, and it's not unrecognized. So thank you very much.
Bob Pay.
Yeah, Mayor, I just likewise like to for Chris to pass on to the staff of what they've done, because we've just been a portion of that, and the staff and how they've handled expenditures and reduced their budgets in order to compensate for this COVID and the lack of revenues, I think is a tribute to the quality people that you've hired as employees, and we should be proud of them as well.
Yep. Amen.
Chris Hands.
And of course, I'm going to once again second what Councilmember Pape said, but I'm also going to add the little things like having someone bring the paper packet to my door and not scream and run away when they see how I look. It's just awesome that the way staff has stepped up on various things. So thank you, all of them.
We'll share that. Thank you. I'm
Yeah,
happy to
last-
answer questions if there's any questions, or make more
Jason?
comments if there's any comments.
Well, I just wanted to reiterate something I said to my wife today. Since I've been working home since March of last year, I've seen a lot of interesting things I didn't know happened while I was at the office in Leawood. And today we saw them vacuum leaves out of the drain intakes. It was actually really cool seeing how the city functions at a level I've never seen it function before.
Yeah. Amen.
David Neal.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of second many of the comments we just had, but in particular, the way that we quickly adapted to the changes in expectations in keeping people safe. I think the staff responded very quickly with workable solutions, and I just want to thank them for that and appreciate their effort, because that wasn't specifically called out maybe. So thanks.
Chris Hands.
I have one more. Please let Public Works know that I haven't forgotten how gorgeous the poinsettias are, and that I'm looking forward to next year.
Last week, I got the opportunity, the pleasure, the honor to come to City Hall and hand out I used to hand out the bonus checks, but I handed out the bonus or check stubs and our Christmas cards, and actually get to talk to almost every employee of our city and thank them for all the hard work that they do on behalf of our council. I talked with a number of them, and the majority made comments about how much of a pleasure it was for them to work for our city and how much they love working here. I've also received emails from employees thanking you all and myself for the support that we give them. We're a success as a city for many, many reasons, but probably high on the top, if not number one, is the fact that we have a good staff and we have a good working relationship, and we're able to make changes and do the right thing. That's what we're all here to do. We may not always agree, but we're all here with the same intentions, and that's to do the right thing for our citizens and for the city of Merriam. So I think we're at the end. So I'd like to wish everybody a happy holiday. We'll see you next year. Hopefully everybody will be safe and happy and get all the things that they need this holiday season. So with that, I'll entertain a motion and a second to adjourn. Bob Pape.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn, Mayor.
And a second. Whitney.
I will second that.
Madam Clerk.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Happy
Aye.
holidays.